So interesting piece in this morning's Washington Post that kind of puts these people into silos of influence. And the first one they call the intimates. Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner, and Pete Sessions, Senator Jeff Sessions, who was really the first senator to come on board behind Donald Trump. Monica, explain to everybody the influence of these three.
Well, we know from just having observed Donald Trump over the last year and a half that I think he prizes loyalty above everything else. And these three individuals have been extremely loyal to Donald Trump through thick and through thin. Steve Bannon is somebody who is closely aligned with Donald Trump's populist message, his message of economic populism and nationalism, if you will. So he's somebody I think ideologically he is totally in tune with. Jared Kushner, of course, his son-in-law, somebody who's part of the inner circle in terms of being in the family, and somebody who's really smart and accomplished in his own right, who Donald Trump trusts on business matters and other issues. And as far as Jeff Sessions goes, Jeff Sessions was really the first politician, normal politician, to come out and support Donald Trump, and that gave his campaign a huge dose of legitimacy and credibility when it needed it most.
Let's look at the operators. You've got Reince Priebus, the head of the RNC, who's going to be chief of staff, one of the few people who's already been named. Paul Ryan, of course, who has shown a lot of signs of cooperation, says he's excited about the legislative path that Donald Trump wants to take. And, of course, Mitch McConnell, who was just reinstated in his role leading the Senate. So, Doug, you say, though, an interesting phrase here. You said that all of this, when you watch the transition, is unsettled and unsettling. Why?
Well, because we know who the actors are, Martha, and we know what their history is with Donald Trump. And Monica is correct to say that loyalty matters, but the other thing is that in politics in Washington, there's a lot more than loyalty that comes into play, like legislative ability. Reince Priebus and Mitch McConnell are going to be central, along with Paul Ryan, to, one, keeping the establishment wing of the Republican Party in line, and second, even more important, to getting the Trump legislative agenda through. But that being said, they're important for their political ties and their legislative ties. But when you go back to what Monica was talking about, to wit the role of somebody like Bannon, who is a key strategic advisor, or Jared Kushner, who is more than anything else family, it's very hard to divine now who is going to have the president's ear and who is going to have the most influence.
I mean, as we all know, everybody starts off these things with an agenda that they want to push forward. And everybody has to serve that agenda. Everybody has to know what their role is in terms of pushing it forward and making deals, making arrangements on Capitol Hill. But when you talk about that person who's in their ear, who might be solving conflict between, you know, for example, a Paul Ryan and a Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner seems to play that role. And a lot of people, you know, are wondering, you know, it's fascinating, really, to see this member of the family, a son-in-law, which is not usually, you know, generally the closest relationship in some families, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But you look at other family members who played a big role in administrations, Monica. Bobby Kennedy comes to mind as his brother's AG, of course. George W. Bush played a very instrumental role in his father's administration as that person who was there to sort of keep an eye on everything.
Sure, yeah, it's not unprecedented. But there is one name, Martha, that we haven't discussed who I think is going to be extremely critical here, and that's Governor Mike Pence when he becomes vice president. He has served on Capitol Hill, served in an executive position as governor of Indiana. He knows how government works, and I think he's going to be probably as powerful a vice president as Dick Cheney was, maybe in a different way. But he is going to wield enormous influence and be absolutely instrumental in getting President Trump's legislative agenda through Capitol Hill.
You know, when you look back at a comment that Paul Manafort made, Doug, about how Donald Trump, he claimed at the time, wanted to be sort of the chairman of the board, not the CEO even. He wanted a vice president who was going to run stuff, foreign policy and domestic policy to a certain extent. You know, there was pushback on that from the campaign, but that was what was said at the time. How do you see Donald Trump's role?
Well, I see it a little differently from Paul, and I have known Mr. Trump for about 30 years, worked with him on commercial projects. I've also worked with Paul Manafort over the years, so I know them both. But I think that Mike Pence will be much more of a chief operating officer than a chief executive officer, because the executive function resides, as it should, with the president-elect Donald Trump. I know him to be somebody who, as Monica was saying, wants his hand and his voice and his opinion in everything. I don't think he's going to do the legislative details. Somebody like Mike Pence will work well, I'm sure, with his good friend Paul Ryan. But make no mistake, this is Donald Trump's administration.
Yeah.